up next we have Kyle Beach and Jason Pucciolini from KnowIP.com. More about them. So Jason brings over 14 years of technical and managerial experience to KnowIP to oversee the company's corporate development. He's responsible for positioning the company for growth by implementing scalable teams. And Kyle's responsible for product and program management outside of work, loves skiing, mountain biking, and sports. A couple housekeeping items. Again, like all the other sessions, you can ask questions in the mobile app, and if we have time at the end, we will try to answer as many as possible. And I think they will also join you outside if you have any questions as well. All right, so without further ado, Jason and Kyle.
Awesome. All right, so before we get started, show of hands, anybody here a current KnowIP customer or used this in the past? Raise your hand, anybody? All right, there's a few out there. For those of you that don't know what we do, we provide remote access to IP devices like DVRs, IP cameras. You can watch your shows that you want to watch on your DVRs when you're away, or check up on your dog when you're on vacation, things like that. So a little bit about us there. I want to start off with a little story about where we've come from. KnowIP's been around for over 15 years, and we actually have our CEO in attendance here, and I thought it'd be good for him to actually talk about how KnowIP started. No, I'm just joking. He didn't know that was coming, so I thought I'd razz him for a little bit. No, so throughout the time, and it's actually funny, I was talking with him and another individual about how the organization was run, back in startup mode 15 years ago, and code was edited in production, and the way they communicated across teams or individuals was to go have a cigarette in the back firewall, stairwell, and just talk about that code that they just wrote in production. So we've come a long way, and so we're actually here to kind of talk everyone through that journey. So at some point, it became time when we started growing to have some sort of organization. So we moved to Agile Scrum, and we really recognized that there were some great improvements in our ability to have knowledge share throughout the organization. So in a single or in a Scrum environment, we use things like Confluence and Jira, and we were able to then have communication across the organization, not necessarily by face-to-face conversation, which is great, we love that, but at any time you can go into Confluence, Jira, find out what people are working on. It also, the Scrum environment created an agreed acceptance. So as priorities were driven down by stakeholders, everyone agreed on what we're working on, why we're working on it, and what the backlog looks like. And that created these clear priorities that we had to work from. So there's some great benefits there. But they also created some new challenges. So when we moved to Agile Scrum, we were very, very focused on the Scrum process, the backlogs, estimation, how to break up stories. That was like stuff we struggled with. And it was, at times, taking us away from what we were trying to do. That's a kind of clear violation of the Agile Manifesto of individuals and interactions over process and tools. So we were hyper-focused on this Scrum thing. And as we developed, or as we worked through all these things, the backlog grew very quickly. And those things that we wanted to do, that were lower in the backlog, really never got done. And we spent a lot of time defining what those things were. And this is a joke, like our marketing manager would always say, like, oh yeah, that's quarter 53. It's way out there in the future. So the other thing is, it really stifled innovation. So as the Scrum team, which is really made up of a cross-functional group of developers, were working through this backlog, it was kind of rigid in what they could do. It was already defined for them, and there wasn't any leeway for them to work through that. So it created some frustration. So that's a little background on where we came from, and then we want to talk you through what we've been through in this last year. That's the kind of the preface to all this. And so how did this all get started? So we're cruising along with Agile Scrum, and at the time, everyone thinks it's great because that's what everyone's using, and we all think we're doing the right thing. Even though we kind of recognized that there were some issues here, we really still thought like, well, this is good, everyone's doing it, Agile Scrum is good. And at the same time, we experienced over 30% revenue growth over the last 3 years. We doubled our staff, and it became harder and harder to manage these projects as we added individuals to this single Scrum team. It was harder for us to communicate with one another, to work on larger features and products, and have those things launch successfully. And then at the same time, product became the bottleneck. So from my point of view, we're adding developers, and I'm having to define more and more things to do, and I was a bottleneck. A little bit about our scale. So as we're deploying code, again, I talked about we handle remote access connections. We handle over 60,000 DNS queries per second. And again, in line with scale, with those 60,000 DNS queries per second, we have 25 million customers in almost every country, or in every country in the world. So just wanted to speak to the single team that's actually producing code that's very, very, very visible. So last year, we attended the 2015 Atlassian Summit in San Francisco, and some concepts were introduced there very loosely. Concepts like demo trusts, health monitors, and project posters, and then this thing called Project Central. It wasn't really a blueprint for us to take home and work with it, but we heard these concepts and we're thinking, those are really cool. Like, show of hands, anybody hear of those last year that came? Yeah, so they were mentioned, and we tried to figure out, all right, how do we go do these things in a way that works for us? So that was the plan. And we spent countless hours actually revisiting some of these talks and trying to figure out how to do them. And so we had this inspiration that we wanted to redefine our cross-functional team concepts. So again, prior to this, we were thinking our development team, our Agile Scrum team, was a cross-functional team because they're made up of different types of developers. And so we thought we were good there. But the concept is we want this to be more than just cross-functional on the development side, but actually involve other people in the organization. We wanted to create a culture where the concept of a cross-functional team starts before committing to a sprint. So getting that feedback involved early in the creation of a project. And we also wanted to create a situation where stakeholder-driven backlogs were moved to cross-functional team-driven backlogs, meaning the teams are coming up with the work, not necessarily stakeholders in the organization. So again, I talked about these concepts of project posters, health checks, and demo trust. I guess I should share then some information of what we then started to discover about these tools. Jason's gonna get into them in more detail. But the project poster, we kind of identified a hybrid between an Atlassian project poster and a Pandora concept that was introduced at last summit. And so we took pieces of those that worked for us and put them together. Health checks we really like. This is something I think Atlassian mentioned last year, and there's, I believe, another talk and maybe a web page that might be going live here after Summit that's going to really define what health checks are. But health checks are, from what we really understood was kind of the concept of you go to a doctor and the doctor asks you questions like, hey, do you drink and you smoke? And you're like, oh, man. So it allows you to like look internally at your team, figure out what's working, what's not working, and then kind of have a little retrospective with your team and help change some of those processes or things that you do. And then demo trusts. Those are like a guiding body to help the team overcome challenges, provide guidance on dependencies, risks, and help align that team with the company goals and some of the scope that team is our process. We also created this page that was the, what are we looking at here? This is the project poster. So just an idea of what the project poster looks like. So what we're trying to get at here is just define the rough scope of what a project is. This is, again, the pieces that we took from an Atlassian project poster and Pandora, and we put them together. Just simple things like, what are we pitching, what is it, and what it's not. Just to try to get a little concept around what the project looks like. Like I said, Jason's going to get into this a little bit more. Demo trusts, we talked about those. in detail. I'm a little bit out of order on my slides, and that's fine. But again, try to use this group of stakeholders to align a team and give them direction without telling them what to do. So we had these concepts that we knew we wanted to use and find a way to implement, but we didn't know how to do them. So what better way to do it than try to do it ourselves? So we assembled an alpha team, and we decided to just go and make a project poster, hold some health checks, do a demo trust, and all of it was around trying to launch how this new version of cross-functional teams would work at NoIP. And it really worked out well. So that's a little background on what led us to this. Jason's going to get into then our reasoning behind why we wanted to do it, and I'll come back in and talk more later.
Can you hear me? Is this on? Okay, so Kyle walked us through, the background of NoIP, kind of how we got to where we are today, and focused a little bit on the operational challenges that we are facing. I want to dive a little bit more into our reasoning for continuing on this path, because in reality, we're a pretty small company. Resources are a little, are a concern for us, and it's scary to make a big change on how we deliver products. And in reality, we could have continued as we were, doing the same process, and it would have worked. We would have had some headaches. Kyle would have had to work a little more, maybe had a little more gray hair, but we would have figured it out. And so we really had to drill in why we were so inclined to be doing this. And in our mind, it was really positioning ourselves for future growth. And to do that, not only did we have to provide tools for our team, but we also had to kind of change the way we thought about doing projects from a cultural perspective. And so really that's where we decided to take on the risk and take on this work and create the alpha team and really try and move this forward. Before I talk about the details of our reasoning and some of the things we considered, I wanted to talk a little bit about culture. And culture is kind of a key word, buzzword. We hear it all the time. At our office, this is a picture of our office. We have this open floor plan that we brag about. We have a kind of a fun group of people that we work with. We have Careless Whisper on endless loop in our bathroom that we're really proud of. Here's our de facto mascot, Snotty Ron. He has some hygiene problems, but loves to cook cupcakes and bring them to his office. So we actually made some Snotty Ron cupcakes and sent them to our largest competitor. They got a kick out of that. So we have a lot of fun. But is that really culture? And we had to sit and talk to ourselves about that. And really, that's a work environment thing. It's a work environment that we're really proud of and we want to continue to foster. But it isn't really what we are getting at when we talk about culture. And for this to work, we really needed to build this culture around self-organizing and self-managing teams. Creativity is stifled if people are just waiting for management to tell them what to do, and it stifles creativity. It limits growth, especially in the size of a company where we're at. We don't have a ton of avenues to grow, but if we can empower these employees to take thoughts and bring action on those ideas, then we really felt like they could grow as individuals. And like Kyle mentioned, we watched plenty of videos and read plenty of blogs from Atlassian, Spotify, and Netflix, and really tried to find a balance that worked for our size of company. So when we talk about culture and what we wanted to do, we really broke it down into 4 components. We wanted to build a culture of ownership. So our employees didn't just work by themselves on their little piece of the puzzle and didn't think about the big picture. So we wanted to really have ownership from start to finish of the project for each employee involved, each of our team members. We wanted to create a space where people were really invited to ask questions and bring up ideas, even if they sounded a little off. We really wanted those vetted, and we wanted everybody to have a voice. And along with that, we wanted early feedback in the process. Nothing kills morale like working on a project for a while just to learn that it was way off. So we wanted to have a process where through these demo trusts, people could get early feedback and really get their projects vetted. And then we spent a lot of time developing our goals as a company, and we wanted to make sure we were laser focused on those, even as we were allowing people to come up with their own projects and work through those. So we kind of pirated a saying from Spotify that's loosely coupled, tightly aligned, and we kind of try and live through that motto. We developed some success metrics that were very quantifiable around why we wanted to do this and what we thought if it would be, how we would determine if it was successful. I didn't want to get into the numbers, but they kind of centered around eliminating silos. We wanted everybody to be working across departments on projects. We wanted to provide transparency for the group, so everybody kind of knew what others were working on, and maybe they could provide input into this. And then we wanted to empower employees to bring ideas to action. And so if you had an idea, you could actually So now, after that's kind of our reasoning, I wanted to talk a little bit about how we manage this change. It was a big change for us. It was a big shift. There's a lot of change in expectations. And so we really did put a lot of thought into our change management plan. At the end of the day, it wasn't a process. It was what we were trying to accomplish as a team. And so I want to kind of talk about how we managed that change. And it really broke down into 3 components. One, we built some Confluence templates, some tools for our employees to use that would make it easy for them to institute the Agile or the Atlassian playbook and some of these concepts that Demo Trust and Health Check that Kyle mentioned. An over communication plan, I put over in parentheses, and I'll get into that here in a little bit. And then we had a beta team. So we growth hacked all this information together. We had this alpha team. We thought it was a great idea. But before we launched it company-wide, we actually had another team called the beta team that vetted us through our Confluence templates and our communication plan, and we learned a lot through that process and made the products even better. Here's an overview of our Confluence templates. Now, I'm not going to focus on the specifics of how these work. That's not the purpose of this presentation. We do have these templates. We can make them available to people. If you just contact Kyle or I, we'll make sure you get them. I want to talk more about the culture around what these brought to NoIP. And the process here is kind of laid out. We develop a poster, so if you have an idea as an employee at NoIP, you team up with another member of the company and you create a poster. And this is just a bunch of ideas, and you get to vet that. And then the poster is used to not only educate the company and management about what's going on, but you actually reference it as you work through the envision, make, and refine stage of the project. Our inspiration for developing these templates was The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. It's a book we recently read as a group. It's a great book. We got a lot out of it. But it's built on this tiered system of basically we have to build this pyramid to get an effectively operating team. And it starts with building trust, and on top of that, there's this concept of healthy conflict. And only if you have healthy conflict will you get commitment from your team. And once you have commitment, then the team actually holds itself accountable, which is something we're after, self-managing, self-organizing teams. And if we hold each other accountable, then we will actually have pay attention to the results and really strive to succeed and meet our success metrics. So first I want to talk a little bit about the poster. The poster really builds on the 2 bottom layers of this pyramid, which are the trust and conflict piece, and I'll kind of show you why. So in this piece, it's pretty safe. We're not actually agreeing to do this project yet. People just get to discuss their ideas, and nothing's off the table, but really the poster focuses people around why we are doing this. Like, what does it do for our customers? That's who we answer to first. What does it do for the employees, and what does it do for NoIP? And this really allows the team to really vet out what they're doing and helps them scope their project. That poster is then pitched at a Demo Trust and is usually vetted through our management team before any further work is done on it. But once it gets approved, their project actually moves into the envision stage. The poster is made available for everybody in the company to look at and see what they're doing. When we built the envision template, it was really around these 4 pieces and around innovation. So we wanted to ask people to think about different ways of doing things. Don't just do the normal. Ask a lot of questions, propose a lot of different ways of solving the solution, and we'll be sure to give you early feedback to keep this project on the rails. And this is a sample of one of our envision templates. It kind of forces people to list ideas, all sorts of ideas, and the pros and cons on how we're going to do that, get through that solution, and then ask any questions that they think they might need. And it also offers an opportunity to provide low-fidelity prototypes and discuss those with our Demo Trust. once the envision phase is completed and the team feels very confident in the, I guess, the plan for the project, we go into the make stage. And this is really getting, this commitment and accountability. And I'll show you how in the make Confluence template, but it's getting the team to commit to finishing the project and holding each other accountable. And we do that by tying all of the tasks that need to happen, either if they're dev related or not dev related. They're tied to Jira tickets, and they get assigned to different members of the team. And then we also build a rollout plan that gets our DevOps team involved as well. So everybody knows who's responsible for what and can check in on their teammates at any time. And then lastly, the team's going really heavy on getting the product released. The refine stage is where they get to it's been released, they get to take a step back and see how they did and evaluate how their project is doing against what they thought would be success for that project. And so it's really this attention to results, the top of the pyramid. And so we ask things, we revisit the success metrics and the benchmark, and we ask what else we can do to kind of push that needle and get the project to perform even better than we expected, and what needs to be changed. So this is really a good exercise for us to not forget about our products once they're launched. We have to actually continually work on them and not neglect them. So back to the communication plan. We dedicated 4 all-hands meetings. We eat lunch, spent an hour. We went through videos. We went through all sorts of documentation. We described the process. Man, we thought we were doing good. We thought everybody understands this. And come to find out, there was still a lot of confusion. And so we said, well, we can't necessarily launch this process unless everybody really understands what's going on. And that's where we kind of came up with this Gamma team approach where it was basically an 8-hour hackathon. The whole entire company did it. We broke into teams. The teams could pick whatever project they wanted to work on, given that they had 8 hours to do it, and they worked through all phases of this envision, make, and refine. And it was really good. We got a ton of feedback because I think some people learn by doing hands-on, and that's what we were missing in our communication plan. We got some good feedback, but we also got really good buy-in from our team. When I announced the Gamma teams, it was like a deer in the headlight look. You expect me to do what? And spend 8 hours in a room with a couple people and deliver something? But at the end, they really enjoyed it, and so it was really good to get some feedback from the group. I'm going to hand it back over to Kyle. He's going to talk about integration and kind of wrap it up.
Cool. So yeah, on the integration side, let's go back and kind of remember the earlier parts of my conversation. We're running a single development team that's running Scrum, and we have this concept of these cross-functional teams running these envision, make, refine project posters, demo trust, health trust. So how do we get that to work together? So one of the things that we realized we needed to do is handle all of these new posters that come in. So we decided to create this meeting that's called Pitch Please, where we basically source all these projects that come together, and it's effectively the first demo trust that project and the owners of that project are working through. And the concept here is just hear them out, understand what they're trying to do, and provide them some guidance on maybe where they should take it, or just say like, hey, this looks great, let's move this in. And when I say that, does that mean we can pitch ideas for anything, right? So no. Projects still have to be aligned with company goals, and that's something that's really, really critical to how all this works. And so making the goals easily available and understood by everybody in the organization is really important. So we also then created this cross-functional team homepage. And the point of this is showing those goals. So the goal to beat Huli or recreate Aviato and integrate Pied Piper into our platform. Big company goals. You can click through to those and find out the success metrics on those goals, and then the projects that have gone through the Pitch Please meeting, and any of those demo trusts would be shown below there. So it's a single place where everyone can see what's in the works, what we're doing, and why we're doing it. All right. So we talked about integration and needing to integrate this into our Scrum process. So we have all these projects. Those are represented by these multicolored circles. Those exist because they went through the pitch please meeting, they went through a demo trust, but we need to figure out how we're going to prioritize them and get them into the Scrum process. So leaders in the organization would prioritize them in a kind of a roadmap planning session, and we'd pick out those 3 or 4 ones that are the most important based on our needs. And we say that because our teams really created a ton of projects, and we couldn't work on all of them. We're a small company and limited in bandwidth, so yes, we wanted to do all those things, and they were great ideas, but we still have this issue where we need to find a way to put them into the existing Scrum backlog so we could execute on those projects. So we prioritized them, made stories, and put them in the backlog. So we received some early benefits doing this, right? We had this blueprint of these project posters that allowed for innovation to occur very early in the planning phases of a project. We empowered teams to drive success. So the people on these teams were the ones envisioning the concept of the project, the feature, whatever it was, and they were the ones that had the full ownership of that project. And it really started to engage the rest of the organization. So when features are created, it wasn't just from product and development and then push it out into production and then have customer support or marketing say, why did you do that? That makes no sense, because that's what was happening. So engaging everybody allowed for better features, better projects to exist. But we still had roadblocks. So we were still handing off these cross-functional team projects to a single Scrum development team. That created problems because there's people, these cross-functional teams envisioned it, they had all these great ideas, but then we needed to maybe bring on 3, 4 developers to execute on it. Maybe only 1 developer existed on that cross-functional team that envisioned it, and now we're having to catch them up in terms of like ramp them up on why we're doing a project. And so there was all of this handoff that created some tremendous problems. It also created an issue where maybe some of the developers weren't fully bought into why we're doing it, because they weren't in those early conflict discussions where they're kind of sparring back and forth early in the process of why we're doing it and some of the reasoning behind that. It then also made for massive context switching. So we worked through one project, go to another one, move on to the next, and as a development unit, you kind of feel like, well, you go from one thing to the next, and when are you really getting into that refine stage? Because you're just working through what's coming down the pipeline. And again, we still had a growing backlog. That was something we set out to solve, but we had this growing backlog of projects. We had great ideas, and we couldn't really execute on them. That frustrated some of the other teams that had some of these great ideas, and they just see their projects stall and sit there. So this kind of brings us to maybe the last month at NoIP and giving the power back. And it's kind of funny because we started this presentation far before this, and making this presentation actually helped drive some of the things that we were doing. So I don't know, that's interesting. So quick reminder, we've got all these projects. They went through roadmap planning and into a single Scrum backlog. We've talked about the tools that we're going to use to do these. The Atlassian playbook. We want these concepts of empowerment of teams, and we wanted to give these teams a purpose for existing. So a very clear vision, and have really everyone on the team act as a servant leader to each other. So that's again the blueprint we created with those cross-functional teams, but we still have these problems with our Scrum environment. And we're missing slides. Bummer. Okay, so we're missing a couple slides at the end, but that's all right. So what did we do after this? So we decided to break up the cross-functional teams, or excuse me, break up the single Scrum team into independent cross-functional teams that would execute on a single goal and mission that was defined by the entire company. So what I mean by this is, we were handing off these cross-functional teams from, these projects from a team to then a development unit to execute on it. Rather than doing that, we just broke up the development team and actually placed them on these teams and gave them those very clear direction as to why they exist. We empowered them. Jason talked about trust, and the big concept there is these teams have to be completely autonomous and know that they can create a project from start to finish. So they can envision it, they can make it and refine it, and not rely on anybody else, as long as they're being bound by those, or as long as they're focusing within the reins of the goals of the entire company. So I had some visuals here to kind of show that, but really the concept is, if anybody's done any research into the Spotify engineering culture, we really liked a bunch of their videos, and that helped drive some of this movement to break up the single Scrum team and just empower the cross-functional teams to do the work. So I'd suggest checking those out if you haven't already. And then really look into the Atlassian playbooks. The Atlassian playbook. The three concepts of project posters, health checks, and demo trust really help align these teams so that they're working on a goal and have a common purpose for existence. So with that, I'll take any questions, and I'll also mention NoIP's hiring. We're growing. We're hiring for several engineers, and we're out of Reno, Tahoe, 30 minutes away from Tahoe, so if you get sick of the Bay Area and want to come up there, then come on over.
Thank you so much. That was so wonderful, and thanks for rolling with the missing slides. We're really sorry. Don't know what happened. You never know what's going to happen here, but they did an awesome job. To continue on, we have some really good questions in the Q&A session, and I also wanted to say some of you had asked, where you can get these. I know they graciously offered that they would share templates with you. We also have an awesome talk tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. With Dom Price, and he's actually going to go through our whole Atlassian playbook. We've modified a lot of this stuff. We're going to have a lot of templates for you, so it's exciting. We really loved when we read their abstract at first, because the whole point of these processes and tools we give is to make it work for your own team. So we thought it was just phenomenal that they were able to do that. And so it really is about making it work for you and your company. But let me pull up the app for some questions. This was a good one. So how did you get buy-in from all involved and everyone who needed to contribute?
Do you want to take it? Or?
Sure, I'll take it. We got buy-in on a couple ways. We talked about the beta team that we had and the communication plan, where we actually vetted our process through a hand-selected group of people to make sure this was going to actually work for our company. It was really hard for us to take what these big companies are doing and really scale it down to something that would work for us. So we wanted the input early from not only us that were developing it, but the people who were actually going to be using it on a day-to-day basis. The second piece was I think really where we got the buy-in was what we call this Gamma team. It was a kind of an 8-hour hackathon-style cross-functional team environment, and people were very hesitant to actually go in and do those. And then at the end of those 8 hours, we saw this transformation of the people who were really reluctant. They saw kind of the value and the benefit of working with different employees in different departments and getting their perspective, and they kind of saw the value of working together like that. And so I think that was really one of the biggest buy-ins. And then the last piece is this whole ideas into action. Anybody could create a poster, and they really love that idea. We have a group of very creative individuals who have a ton of ideas, and they were getting kind of stifled by not seeing any progress on their ideas. So this was a way to actually get their ideas formalized and out there and being considered by the company.
And one thing to add to that is we were very clear that we did not have all the answers through this process. And so in being agile, we were very open about not having all the answers, but trying to get feedback on how it's working, what's working, what's not working, and try to make changes in the coming weeks to react to any feedback we were getting. So
Awesome. Another question was, how did you measure your success metrics? So transparency, culture.
Sure. Yeah. I'll field this one too, Kyle.
Okay.
So our success metrics. There's a couple things. One, we actually would ask. We had a way of asking people how much they knew about what other people were doing, and so there was a matter of use on the posters. People were actually going and commenting in Confluence on the posters of other teams. So that was one level of transparency.
We made surveys.
Yeah,
so
we did surveys.
with like anonymous surveys on just how you like the process, asked questions that we're looking for specific answers for to see if they understood something. And
the other, I guess, eliminating silos piece was actually looking at the makeup of the teams. These teams were actually formed naturally and voluntarily. We weren't artificially forcing a team together, so we were looking at how teams formed and who ended up on the teams, if they were across disciplines or if they were all, I guess, from one department. And we saw a lot of cross-collaboration. So those were a couple examples.
Awesome. Someone else wanted to know, how do you approach manager training and closing the gap between the trenches and the 5,000-foot manager view?
So I think our approach to that is, rather than having the 5,000-foot manager view, is to get in the trenches as managers. So all of us managers, including our CEO, was involved with the cross-functional team at some point. And so there's no better way to do it than just be in the trenches yourself.
Yeah, I'll add to that we actually spent a lot of time talking to our employees about the process and what they felt. So we tried to keep our finger on the pulse that way as well. So we're also pretty small, so it's a lot easier to do with 20 people.
The next one was, as a QA oversight team, how do you encourage creativity and innovation while ensuring zero defects going to production without being too process heavy? That's a loaded question. It's a good one.
So QA, we don't have QA. That's how we do it. So no, that's not true. QA is really a function of the cross-functional team. We don't have a role that's specifically defined for QA. And actually, I went to another talk this morning on that and how it's done at Atlassian. And really, QA is up to the team to do. So how do we do it? It's just an all-in type of concept that everyone's responsible for code in production.
Perfect. And the last one we have is, your process works well for new features, but how do you balance the need to work on items in the backlog versus these new features?
I'll take that one too. So that one's a tough thing to swallow because, right, we have all these great ideas. We have so much that we want to do. We have an incredible vision of where we want to take this company. But again, we're a small company, so there's very limited things that we can actually execute on. So what it came down to was, let's focus on two things, or actually three. So we've got three primary things we're focusing right now, and we have three teams aligned around those goals. And the concept is, we might actually bring those concepts into production in 3-5 months, and we'll roll into the next thing. But we had to really minimize the projects that we took on, and it's hard to say no to some things when they're great ideas and you know you want to do them. But it's just, you've got to prioritize them and say, these are the top three things that are important to us, and we're going to do those first over anything else.
Perfect. Well, thank you again. That was wonderful. Another round of applause for Jason and Kyle.
Cool.